Hi, and welcome to our panel discussion for Eve Mills Allen's new book, In the Arms of the Inup. This is the extraordinary story of a Guatemalan refugee who came to Canada and his work with human rights advocacy across the world and his experiences. So, Eve, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, basically, first of all, it's first and foremost an incredible tale about a child, uh, Hermes, who narrowly escaped the genocide in Guatemala and made his way to a new place to live, faced many hardships, grew up, started to work for a United Nations organization, and to be kidnapped and tortured. And many things happened. And it's just really an incredible story of survival. When he made his way to Canada, um, to the brand new land where everything was supposed to be so much better, I'm sorry to say that he didn't get quite often the mental health help that he was looking for. So that was one of my concerns when we were doing the book. But most of all, I think this is an inspirational story of the resilience of the human spirit. And I was really honored to work with Jeremias. I had worked in the field of journalism for many years, so and then had been working as a therapist when I met him. And so it was a brand new experience for me to try to put both of those things together and try to listen to his story and give it the credit, the time and the space that it needed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Right, and it is a powerful tale. I appreciated reading all the work that the both of you had done in the book. So today we're joined by a panel of people who have read the book, reviewed the book, written the foreword, and in the book. And so we'll go around and we'll introduce ourselves just simply because we are from a wide range of different areas, different backgrounds, and it'll be an interesting perspective as we discuss the events in the book. So we are different countries, different provinces, and I'll just allow everyone to introduce themselves here. One moment.
Starting with Jeremias.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Jeremias Teku. I'm originally from Guatemala, and I'm here in Canada almost 20 years. And yeah, it has been challenging. It has been, and please don't take me wrong, Canada is a beautiful place to be. But when we are coming in Canada, perhaps we are not bringing so many luggages, which is part of my story, because the most important for me is to rescue and to give an opportunity for my children. And a lady, a woman who is the mother of my kids, and who does nothing to see and do with anything with my story in my life, because my story begins when I was a child, and then all the persecution, like that was just me, like trying to do my part in terms of justice, social justice, and trying to bring our story, the truth, to our local, national, international eyes. And that's why it's pretty sad, but in the meantime, it's very upsetting that with that, it seems like, yeah, when you read the book, you see that like from the beginning was upsetting, right? So being a refugee for me, coming to Canada, I was so grateful because Canada provided an opportunity for my children. But in the meantime, I was upset and angry because it seems to me like I'm running away from my own story, and the work, it hasn't been done yet. And that was my brain at that time. And coming to Canada, I promised myself when I'm flying from the airport from Guatemala to Los Angeles, to Miami, I was crying, but of anger. And I say, I will never, ever talk about human rights once again.
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks later, I end up in Halifax in Nova Scotia, talking in front of 3, 4, 500 people. So that's never, I think it's part of the journey, right? And from there, Tramaush has been my mom, and my dad, and my sister, and my brother, because since then I've been traveling all across Canada once again and never stopped.
Mm.
So that's a little bit about me, and I live here right now in Fredericton, my new home. I love Fredericton. I love all what is it, and once again, it's coming back again in the field with which I loved, protecting and advocating for the human rights for the people, the most vulnerable around the world, which is refugee. In the beginning, when I came to Canada, I was very upset because of being a refugee. I didn't want to be a refugee. I was working with refugees in Guatemala. But then coming here, I was upset because working with refugee and you being a refugee, what does that mean, right? It was very upsetting. But in a couple of months later, it's part of my crash, it's part of my culture shock or whatever you call it. But in the end, when I got the news, when I got to go back and see my story in the back and our current around global, what's happening, I was so fortunate and blessed that my family have the opportunity to be alive and to have an opportunity that Canada open up their arm and say, welcome to Canada.
Wow,
At
absolutely.
the moment that I'm crying and I'm upsetting that I don't want to be a refugee, I appreciate the blessing and the opportunity to be here, because at the time that I'm working at my workplace, there is millions and millions of children, wives, women, mom, grandmothers, that there is nobody in the world who is listening to them. So it's part of what has been happening when I came to Canada, actually. And that's what inspired me. That's what called me once again to not give up and come back to the field of never to be in silent again. And we have to break the silence anywhere where we are.
Well, and I think that was really striking in the book. One thing that stuck with me, I thought, wow, you went to these lengths and put yourself in such danger and your family. And it was fighting for something that should be so something that we need, something that's so elementary, human rights. You shouldn't have to put yourself in danger to support the rights of other people. That was definitely a huge part of the book. I spent a lot of time thinking that. So I thank you for your efforts. It's been an unbelievable fight, an unbelievable journey. So that's amazing.
Yep.
And so Eve is also in New Brunswick. She lives in Moncton, and she's on there as well. And we have Dr. Dujak in Fredericton. You want to give us a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, yes, I'd love to. Thank you, Jeremias and Eve, for allowing me to be part of this process. I'm a retired social work professor from St. Thomas University. I've been here in Fredericton for the last 22 years now. Before that, though, I worked for almost 25 years doing solidarity, human rights work, and much of it focused on Central America. And in the 80s, I lived in the region and was very involved in Canadian solidarity work, both from the region and from the north to the south and the south to the north, working with NGOs, and certainly spent time in Guatemala during the period that Jeremias has lived and talked about in the book. And so it's a bit reading Jeremias' story. I just felt it's through his story. His story is the story of tens of thousands of Guatemalan Mayan peoples who were displaced, killed, massacred. It's just, it's a horrific story. And was a horrific time in history, but it isn't over. And so I currently participate when I can in Breaking the Silence, the network that is here in the Maritimes to support the ongoing struggles in Guatemala. So it's a privilege to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And a few thousand kilometers away, a few time zones away, we have Dr. Helen Maskeller, who wrote an endorsement for the book, and she's located in Southend-on-Sea, UK. Oh, we've got you on mute there, Dr. Maskeller. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hermes and Eve, for inviting me to be part of this discussion tonight. I am a professor in the counselling program at the University of New Brunswick in the Faculty of Education. And I'm also a counselling psychologist in Fredericton, working with adults primarily with post-traumatic stress disorder and other challenges. But I was really drawn to the work that Eve and Hermes were doing. I grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, as they were called. There's a great deal of war and terrorism. And I was a new Canadian to Canada some 30 years ago. So I was profoundly moved by my reading of In the Arms of Inup. And I think it will provide rich insights to those who read it and help readers get some insights and understandings of what it must be like for new Canadians and refugees coming from war-torn countries, adjusting to their new life in Canada. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
And my name's Ian Heft. I'm in Owen Sound, Ontario. I did live in Fredericton for a couple of years. I worked with Eve. And I also worked for the agency where Hermes works. I was an English as a second language instructor. So after traveling out east and back to finish my own master's in counseling, I'm now doing my placement, just about to wrap it up at the hospital where I was born. So kind of did a full circle thing myself there. And that's been an excellent experience. And I remember when Eve was working on this book a couple years ago. So to see this accumulated and see the counseling masters I was working on when I was out east accumulated is an amazing journey in and of itself. So very excited to be here. And this is really apropos to my own work in mental health and working with both mental health and working with newcomers. I teach English as a second language. We started settlement services completely in the middle of COVID. So that's been fun. I had to start an ESL program with students I've maybe been online with almost a year and haven't even met yet in person. So that's, you know, just like we're brought together today over Zoom, we do the same thing in our community. So it's great that we have backgrounds in mental health and in settlement services, because they're both important work, and there's a lot of intersections as you will see. So Eve, I'll just take through a little bit more of our presentation here, and you can tell us about the book and some pictures that relate to parts of it as well.
All right. Well, I mean, I want to do a bit of a reading, but first I think it's important that I mention the title and talk about Inup. It is Guatemala's national tree, and some of them tower as high as 100 feet or more. And I thought this was really amazing because I've never seen one in person, but picturing this in the story to me is really amazing. So I did a little bit of research about it, and they told me that the clefts and the branches at the top can measure up to 150 feet across. So it's a huge tree, and it plays an important part in this book. So I did want to mention that first. So as it says here on the screen, the publisher is HARP Publishing, which is located in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and they focus primarily on stories or anything that promotes healing, the arts for healing equity. And it was decided that by me, Armaeus, the publisher, that it would be very appropriate that a percentage of each book would go to help Breaking the Silence Network. So 10% of every book sold, so regular books, that would be $2.50 a book, will go to the BTS network to help them. I know there'll be some more talk about BTS here in a few minutes, so I'm not going to get into that too much, okay? Just some pictures that, actually these two pictures were provided by a friend of mine, totally serendipity. We got talking, she had these pictures, it was amazing. And these pictures are actually in the book. So I think they're pretty amazing and they speak for themselves.
Monuments to the victims as well.
Yeah. And the three generations that are talked about in the book. The father, Armaeus's father, Felix, and his son, Oscar. And Oscar actually, there's 2 chapters in the book that Oscar, when I talk to Oscar, that, you know, are about him and what it was like for him at coming here as a little child and what it's like for him now as a young adult in his 20s. So it's pretty exciting that the 3 generations are all in this book as well. And these pictures, the picture in the middle is actually a poster from Amnesty International. And that's a picture with Armaeus's mother and sister. And the 2 pictures on the side are when his father passed, which was about a year ago, roughly a year ago. And so the observance from actually in Guatemala and the observance that Armaeus had here at home. And there's the 2 of us.
Yeah. I like that there's a picture in a coffee shop because there's that great scene where the 2 of you, you know, have that Christmas time chat. And I think he helps lift your spirits while you're going through some stuff too. So you guys were both helping each other.
It was an amazing journey writing this book. And too long for me to talk about it all now, but one of the things that I know we'll talk about later and has become very important is knowing what place to be or what setting to be in, depending on what we were talking about. So if things were not gut-wrenching, sometimes we would meet in coffee shops. Sometimes we would meet in the park and sit at a picnic bench. A lot of the work was done in my home after I realized, and then I realized that it went better with breakfast. So we'd have breakfast. And sometimes if it wasn't so heavy, we'd have breakfast out at a restaurant, you know, but it was amazing. And it actually changed my life too. You know, I've been forever changed by working with Armaeus and on this story. And I'm actually really emotional about that.
Well, and it was striking, you know, you had to take the counseling relationship outside of the 4 walls of the office, right? And find space to make that happen in other places. I thought that was interesting too. And it shows about being flexible and giving a person the space to tell their story, you know, in a non-conventional setting sometimes, but that's healing too. It's curative in and of itself.
And I really didn't know what I was doing some of the time. So I'm going to
go with the heart kind of thing.
I'm going to read a little bit about from the book before you go on to the next questions.
Yep.
In the introduction, there is an explanation, the kind of a backdrop, and Suzanne really helped me with this, the backdrop for the climate at the time. So I'm just going to read one of the paragraphs from the actual introduction. In 1960, the political climate was volatile, and life for many Indigenous peoples was forever changed. It was the beginning of 36 years of horror the government called a civil war. The Indigenous population knew it as genocide, a massacre that killed approximately 200,000 Guatemalan civilians. kidnappings, unimaginable, extreme torture, rape, and destruction of complete villages were the trademarks of this time, particularly for the Mayan people. And even though a peace accord was signed in 1996, the quieter slaughter still continues. Okay, so I want to read a little piece here in the beginning about, we were talking, Jeremias and I were talking, and it was just before he told me the legend of the tree. So I'm going to read about that. There were so many times that, you know, so many things I felt like when I was listening to Jeremias talk, that I was completely drawn into the middle of the story. You know, it was like I was suddenly there. It was surreal for me at times. Okay, so sorry about this, but I'm just trying to find. All right. I got mixed up when I, here it is. This is right after his two brothers went missing. My mother decided on the second day of the search to go to the military base in Rabanal, Bay of Verapaz town, to ask if they had seen my brothers. I did not want her to go. I had to take care of my baby brother. She was incarcerated, but they let her go the next day. I saw bruises all over her face. Even now, I'm not sure if she was raped by the military. My mother never talked about it. During that week, we noticed many strangers walking in our villages. The military were destroying houses, killing domestic animals. They raped girls of any age in front of their parents, brothers, community, including my relatives. When I realized that, I worried about my three little sisters and mother. Jeremias tries hard to block out these kinds of memories and not speculate on what happened to his mother during her detention and beating by soldiers. He does recall asking the priest on more than one occasion to save her. Relentlessly, the pictures of the torture and dead bodies kept trying to capture his mind, but he fought hard to concentrate only on how to survive. Some memories need to be extinguished as quickly as possible. In part, Jeremias did this by pretending it was not real. It was just a bad dream. Others remained safely concealed in compartments, ever present, yet contained, at least most of the time. Otherwise, the trauma would take over. Jeremias says he simply ran out of compartments when he got older. As a boy, focusing only on survival kept him motivated. He takes a deep breath and continues. I remember I was crying and told Mom, I don't want to die. Tonight we will hide. We will go and sleep under Inup. And I pointed to the big tree. I was more afraid of the soldiers than the legend. That night, my uncle and his family were butchered, and my little cousin came with us. Why were you afraid of the tree? I asked, allowing Jeremias to pause and turn his thoughts to something else. I couldn't imagine reliving this horror. Do you want to stop? Jeremias smiles, but the tears still dominate his dark eyes. His eyes, the color of the black coffee he is drinking, reach out for my understanding. I can't, he says. It has to be told. It has to come out of inside of me. When it comes out, it might not hurt so much.
Right, and it is visceral. You talk about feeling transported yourself into the situation. He feels like he gets taken back to the moments of that he was experiencing that. Jeremias, I appreciate when you said that it was beyond emotion. It felt like it was even deeper than something you could convey, non-language. It was deeper than that. Jeremias, if I can ask, what helped you have the strength and the courage to be able to escape such dangers as a child, and then again, once more as an adult?
At the time, because I was like with my mom actually when we went to the second day and looked for my brothers. The only thing that we saw is many people, murders, and picking up part of the bodies and trying to recognize and identify if in between them they were my brothers, but we didn't see them, none. So we once again, it's like in that moment I didn't have any fear, like, to be honest. Like, it's just we're looking for our brothers, and the massacres started like 1 or 2 years ago, and we know that my brother they can be anywhere, like in those villages that are around the road, like, because at the time you're afraid to pick up somebody and take them and dig a hole and make sure like they are at least like to burn them, right? So to sort of like because we weren't allowed to take them to the cemetery, right? And that's where the decision that, because all the nights we're hearing like the soldiers, that the time was at night, but then the daytimes, like there is no time to be killed and disappear. So seeing my uncles, family, and relatives that they were killed in front of one-on-one, and the military telling my uncles and asking them, pushing them to say that they were part of the revolution, they were part of the guerrilla. And even though one of my oldest cousin, my oldest relative, like the daughter of my uncle and my aunt, she said, yeah, me, yes. But she definitely, it is not real, but she did it to save the family. But even though she did say yes, that's what the end of the family, all of them. And the little one, the other one who was playing with us at my place, he was safe because he was with us. Then at that night, that was the decision to say, no, I'm not gonna sleep here. And that's where I told my mom, we're gonna sleep under La Ceiba in Inup. And it's such a, to me, it's the best place to hide, because there is a little bit hole to go into, and there is a river beside. And at the time, the fear of the Inup, because there is a legend, like at night, it's that tree is coming alive and disappear people or children. That's what our elders, they were telling us. At the time, I don't care. I just want to save my sister and my mom. So we went to that tree that night. We left around 6, 7. And then the next thing we noticed, like after 2 or 3 days hiding, our house was burned in fire. So I think it's, I don't know. I don't really, what is it when me, but one thing I have in mind is I don't want to die. I don't want to die, and I want to save my sister.
Right. Just keep going,
So
keep pressing
keep
on.
going. And because I saw so many, and my father was disappeared at the time too. So I just, that's it. I don't want to die. And if I don't want to die, I'll take my sister with me, and I took my mom with me. So that's the only things that is taken in my mind, that I don't want to die.
And the book talks about, weighing out that decision. Even though you had a fear of it from the past, you still decided, and it became protective. So I think that was interesting how it connected to the legend, but then also your decision. So that was really well laid out, and it was a really vivid image. That was excellent. So, now that you are here in Canada and working to support other refugees and newcomers, why was it important for you to tell your story now? I know you mentioned that you ran out of compartments and you thought by it out, it might not hurt so bad, but what's the significance of telling your story now with Eve's help in the book?
I I was working all my entire life against time and speeding since I was a child. I don't want to see my reality. I don't want to suffer pain. In front of any injustice, I have to stand up. And it seems like it's my homework to fix society. And I have to give a chance and opportunity to myself to be myself, to feel pain, to release my fears. And that's motivates me to
Self-care, to take care of yourself. Yeah.
To take care for myself, but how am I gonna do that? In Guatemala, I didn't know that I have post-traumatic stress. Coming to Canada, I was so angry. And then, but it's a confused, it's sort of a mix of feeling because I'm angry, but in the meantime, I'm so sad. I'm so sad. I couldn't sleep my first 5-6 months in Canada. I slept 1 hour. I had to lock my windows, my door, everything. And then when I learned English, I pushed myself, but I refused to learn English my 3 months in Canada. But after that, I say, no, English is my food, my drink. And if I want to be the same Jeremias as I was yesterday, I have to do it right now. And that's how it started. As I was at 6-7 months at the MCF, multicultural, I ended up in St. Thomas. And I was crying when I was in St. Thomas too, because I was so proud when I was at the multicultural. My English was so high, but I'm coming to St. Thomas, zero English again. So my frustration is always, I am so interacting man. I love to play. I want to dance. When I'm working with the community, with children in any age. Coming to Canada, I feel the most stupid man in the world. So it's not just my story itself. It's me here, being like that. I want to do something. I want to work. I want to be myself. I want to. I don't want to do free money, for example. To me, like this is part of help me, but I want to help myself. I want to be myself. To me, I'm so proud that I'm able to work, and I'm smart. I have degree, I have studied, I have skill, I have experience. So that's how inspiring me to say, no, it's if I'm gonna be, if there is something that I have to do, firstly for myself is to look for help.
Right.
Because I was extremely sad, but in the meantime, I was in speed. I was part of, I mentioned that in the book too. I was part of the Canadian Council for Refugee as a board of director. So traveling like 10 months and like in all Canada. And why is that? And coming back and there is no break for Jeremias because I had to work. I want to see the youth. I want to see the children. I want to see the parents activate and doing something right. So, but keep in mind that I am not okay, but I didn't know that I wasn't okay. I thought that my action in kindness, my solidarity here in Fredericton, in Guatemala, it's all across Canada, being part of Amnesty International too. This is the way how to support, but I'm becoming tired. I'm becoming tired. I got sick, and my escape is having a 6-pack of beer, right? And then look for mental health, and it didn't work for me. I went to another professional. It didn't work for me. So that's where I start to say where I'm gonna go now.
Right.
So I'm gonna leave it there because
Well, and I think from what you've said, it sounds like finding healing, the first step or the most important step, was finding safety and finding a place to kind of express yourself and to become involved. And I think that's something you probably see with the people you work with. They first come, they find a sense of feeling safe in their community, and then they feel like they can contribute. And so, like you say, it's working inward too, like looking at taking care of yourself too, as well, while you're taking care of other people. And you connected as well with, you mentioned some of the organizations that you were connected with, Breaking the Silence out of the Maritimes. And Dr. Dujak is connected to them, and she works passionately with that cause. So, and as we said, 10% of the proceeds of the book will go towards Breaking the Silence. Dr. Dujak, can you tell us a little bit about BTS and the importance of these organizations in helping refugees?
BTS, Breaking the Silence, Maritimes Guatemala chapter, is a grassroots, very voluntary, people to people, no frills organization. And in terms of what Jeremias was just sharing, organizations like BTS are there right where people are. It's not a professional helping organization. It's just a grassroots, people to people, connecting people. And I think the word accompaniment is the word that stands out. And it's part of BTS is Breaking the Silence. It's part of their history, in terms of literally physically accompanying people. Mayan refugees trying to return in the late 80s to their lands after scorched earth policy, after massacres, and literally calling on, human rights defenders across the world to go and support. And that's how BTS was born, to literally Canadians and many others physically volunteering to go and accompany people trying to return home. In the Guatemalan context. And so that word accompaniment is so layered and so full. It's in the history, but it's also very much speaks to the process that Jeremias experienced, this gap between, our professional helping services and what people are really experiencing day to day. And we know that in the BTS experience, we know that, I know it from work I've done with the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture, work I've done with Rwandans, that it's that reconnecting, it's that ability to befriend, to connect with people in very simple ways through the resettlement process, connect with Canadians, not just in the kind of immediate needs that refugees have for resettlement, but that deep support that's needed when people are traumatized for life, and understanding what that process of accompaniment really means. And it's
being right there with them. Yeah.
It's the commitment to walk with people for the rest of their lives. It's, I think my critique, and I'm a professional social worker and I teach social work, is that, the helping professions at a professional level, it's it really is a limited Western concept. And I think so many cultures are very communal, and we don't understand that sort of deep necessity to help people reconnect in a very at the level of humanity, when people have gone through that kind of trauma. And that accompaniment means not curing. It's not about curing. It is about a process of healing, though, that can take place through that walking with people. And BTS is committed to that. Lots of organizations are committed to that. BTS does it in several ways. certainly with ongoing campaigns and urgent action in support of human rights, defending land, for example, those are still issues in Guatemala, defending the need for basic human rights because structurally little has changed in Guatemala. Also, there's a wonderful program of sending cooperants. And this is part of breaking the silence as well. You know, helping to educate the next generation, giving them the opportunity, Canadians, young people to experience the reality, giving them the opportunity to be taught and to learn with Indigenous people in Guatemala. And so that it's never forgotten.
Right.
You know,
the reconciliation process, one that parallels what we do in our own country with our Indigenous people. You know, there's overlaps for sure.
There's very many, as I was working with Eve on the book, I've also worked with Indigenous populations here, and it's like peeling I remember one Aboriginal elder, you know, when I was working on a major healing strategy in Ontario, that Aboriginal organizations are putting together with support from the provincial government. And they talked about the healing process as it's like the layers of an onion, peeling the layers of an onion. And it's a collective process, you know. It is in the case of Guatemalans. It's in the same thing with the Rwandans, the same thing with Indigenous peoples here. You know, it's individual trauma, but it's collective trauma.
Right.
And it means collective healing. And so back to my point, my critique around professional helping, it's very individualized, it's very Western driven, it's and what needs to happen, and that's where, you know, groups like BDS come in, is it fills that gap at the community level. Reconnecting people to their own humanity, and it's educating. I mean, like when Eve says her life was changed, my life was changed too, through experiences in Guatemala and the rest of Central America, profoundly changed. So solidarity, you know, is both ways, and it's huge. But to me, there's a whole layer of community that we tend to leave out when we think professional helping, and it's really community and reconnecting that I think enables that accompaniment. And for me, that's true solidarity. So, you know, when you're accompanying that person for the rest of their lives, and you're befriending, and that's simple. That doesn't cost money. That just costs, you know, human commitment, and we can transcend those kinds of horrors, you know, and the instinct behind the kinds of evils that get perpetrated in the world, and that's how we conquer it. So BTS is a little seed that does that. It's a persistent seed. It's existed since the 80s, and we just carry on. And so it's very helpful that the proceeds of this book and the graciousness of Jeremias and Eve sharing it will really continue to support some of that advocacy work and some of the urgent action campaigning work that needs to happen, and the education work, being able to send people so that they know and can never forget.
And it shows that the community can span more than just one global area. It makes it international. It makes the community, people know that there's people even in other parts of the world that care about what they're going through. It's not just one area. It's very widespread. And that's amazing to think that, you know, from the Maritimes all the way to Guatemala and all these other parts of the world, that's really powerful solidarity, I think. So Jeremias, what part did BTS play in your story?
I met BTS almost 28 or 30 years when I was working with the UN. And well, the programs for the UN, because it's for the Catholic Church that I was working in, but the programs is all from the UN. And so that's where I met BTS the first time. And actually, just to give a little bit about the BTS and well explained, Suzanne, I really appreciate, is that I couldn't done my work my last 7-8 years work in Guatemala without BTS. Why is that? This young fellow, like the Canadians that they're coming from BTS, they're coming in Guatemala, they are there protecting us. They are like our shield, like what do they say?
Human shield.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that for us because we as an activist, we as a Guatemala, we as a local, we're not being respected by our system. The police, the military in Guatemala. And they at the time they still, or up to now, they still the intelligence from the Guatemalan system, from the government, right? So if you are acting out like like me, putting up like in the news, like the exhumation that's happening in Rabinal, and we have an exhumation of 500,000 people bodies, and then we took photos and we send it to local news and in the radio and internationally. That's the government didn't like that because always the government say this was the guerrilla or this is the civil war.
It was they were distracting from it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then in all the news in Guatemala in the 70s and 80s, when any massacre happened, it was the military. This is what I remember. I didn't see any guerrilla guy came in. No, and it was the soldiers, okay, the tanks and the helicopters. So how I'm gonna buy into that? And it's so another thing that my contribution. That's why I want to do so bad this book too, is to sort of like enter the concept in all the nation. To say, for example, here we're talking about reconciliation. In Guatemala, please do not talk to me about reconciliation. It's an offense. It's a sort of a slap in the face of our victims.
Right.
It's in Guatemala. The government of Guatemala says before the peace agreement it has to sign, or after that, reconciliation. How are you gonna tell me reconciliation when I did not ask you to come and kill my parents or my sister, my mom? I did not ask that. The second thing is, okay, I understand that there is a conflict. I didn't fight you. I didn't look for fight. Huh? So if it's true that there is some game killing among themselves, the guerrilla, because it does exist, the group exists too. I'm not defending, I'm not here being against the soldier, the guerrilla. No, there is two groups, okay? The problem with that is both groups, they mess up with our communities. So then, okay, be specific then when you talk about a reconciliation. Okay, we're gonna reconcile with the revolution, with the community or with the guerrillas. Okay, but with our villages, you kill us.
Yeah.
And the government of Guatemala never ever accept that.
Right. There's a social contract that's broken there where the people that are supposed to protect you have committed this, and there's not admission on that part yet, is what you're saying.
And that's where we call, as an activist too, we call it ethnocide. Because if you see the statistics of how many people they were killed, they were the Mayans. The Mayan descendant, you go to Quechua, you go to the north, east, west of Guatemala, the Mayan people.
Yeah.
And recently, 2 years ago, I think, there is a documentary about finding Oscar, which is pretty much close to my story. So our story is connected to Rwanda, is connected to the Congo, is connected to any single where in the world. So the importance of this book, once again, for me, I want to save life. When we are surviving with this type of situation, so many of us, we just get rid of our life. So how many Guatemalan, they died because for intoxication, like drinking too much, for example. Nobody speaks about it, our true story, why they died of that. It's mental health. It's all the shit that we've been through with, and they put into our head, and we didn't choose that. So that's why, to me, it's it obviously was challenge, and that is one wish, one hope that in my 40s, on my 50s, I want to keep saving humanity. I want to tell my brother and sister who has been treating in parts that life is beautiful. That life is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's an important message to convey. Absolutely. So Eve, we've talked a little bit about this as your two big kind of areas of work have been in mental health and in journalism and writing, and you kind of balance both of those roles in this book. And so Irvin Yalom is a famous psychiatrist and writer, and he actually teamed up with one of his clients to write a book called Every Day Gets a Little Closer, and it's kind of about, he writes their therapy experience and she writes it and they put it in together. So, you know, as a journalist and then becoming a mental health therapist, how are you able to balance your interests as a writer with your responsibilities as a therapist when working with someone like Jeremias?
Well, it was tricky on both fronts, to be honest with you. My journalism career, part of that was 13 years as a newspaper reporter. So everything is driven by getting the story quickly. I mean, that's inside of me, right? And then I work in the kind of therapy still today where people only have so many sessions.
Yeah.
So you're still getting the story quickly.
Yeah.
So here's Eve with this training of getting the story quickly on both fronts, coming into this situation with a great deal of empathy, but not knowing how to handle that part, you know? Mm-hmm. So I have to admit, that was probably the biggest challenge for me. And I know if you ask Jeremias, he would say the same thing, was learning that I learned how to appreciate silence. I mean, we were taught to do that, but that was only supposed to be for like a few minutes or an hour or something. But what I had to learn to appreciate sometimes for Jeremias, that silence could be 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I needed to respect that. And it was hard because I pushed sometimes and I didn't know the difference, you know, like I thought I was pushing gently and he pushed back, he told me. But it was a good thing because we found this way to communicate, mm-hmm. a way where there's a flow.
Taking a longer view of it, like a longer frame of, And
I realized that even with those gaps, those times in between, it gave me time as well. Because one of the things that isn't talked about a whole lot is the vicarious trauma, mm-hmm. you know, but oh my gosh, you know, when I would hear Jeremias, I would just sob with him sometimes. I would be crying. And then I'd have to work really hard afterwards to deal with that. And also not to become too connected to it. I had to learn, there was a lot of balancing to do. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I grew as a person, as a therapist, as a writer, as a human being. And after a while, like it was like every little bit was valued. You know what I mean? I took his lead. It was like when you learned to waltz or something. You know what I mean? You got to let go of the lead. You can't be the one taking the lead. He had to take the lead. So I learned to do that after a while, and it was a very beautiful process. So for me, that was probably the hardest juggling act that I actually did, you know, and also I needed to make myself really more aware of the culture.
Yeah.
So I got some books actually from him and I did some reading so that it would be a little more knowledgeable about the background, about customs, about that kind of thing, you know? Mm-hmm. And then we started to have beautiful discussions and then it changed. There was a point where it changed and it was like very reciprocal. And
there is helping each other. Yeah.
There is a chapter in the book, and I'm not going to read from that tonight, but there is a chapter in the book where we meet, you know, I think it's Boxing Day, and I'm really upset, and he ends up giving me words of wisdom. but it seemed like a natural process. So in a normal therapeutic relationship, that would never happen, see?
Mhm. Right.
But I think the most important thing, and several, I've read this from lots of people who write about therapy, argue about the modalities, right? But nobody really has ever argued about the importance of the therapeutic relationship.
Mhm.
And so what I had to learn was the relationship was the most important thing
Center.
between,
Yeah.
the center. Because if Armaeus didn't trust me, and trust doesn't come in 2 days,
Mhm.
2 weeks, or even a month, there's no time limit on that. And I had to learn ways to allow him to start to trust me in order for him to open up. And after that, it seemed the flow went very well. And I'd like to think it helped him. I know it certainly helped me. And now when we talk, it's about how we can both help other people,
Yeah.
like all the plans we would like to see happen and that kind of thing. So it's been
It interlocks, like advocacy with mental health, with writing, with,
oh yeah.
and it, like I said, you took it outside of the bounds of the four walls of the counseling office. And in one way it was something to adjust to, but in another it was certainly liberating. When you're
Well,
time limited,
yeah.
I work with in a brief counseling with 8 sessions, and session 6, that's when they're going to drop something, because it's almost like they're conscious that they're running out of time, and you have to scramble and, and tie it up, where you can by the end of those 8 sessions, usually, unless you can get extra. But certainly, yeah, the time frame, you had a much longer view, and you're still working with it, so
Yeah. And
that's interesting. Absolutely.
yeah. And I mean, this book started out as the healing process, but it wrote itself after a while, because I had to actually push things away that I could write about, because there's still that whole piece about the greed and the mining and all of that in Guatemala, and people who are still being killed down there. But I couldn't go down that path because it would take away. So, but all this other mental health stuff, it surfaced, it had to be dealt with. It came to the surface on its own. So I'm very, very happy, but very humbled to even be just a little bit of a part of this process, because I really believe in my heart that this book can really change lives and really get the dialogue going for how we need to better work in the mental health field.
Right. And
Yeah,
Dr. Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, I was gonna add on that, Eve. I think it challenges a lot of our working assumptions. To build on Dr. Dudziak's comments, as a counselor educator, there's a richness and a complexity about Hermaeus' story and his healing journey that I don't think 6 sessions would do it. And
Right.
certainly with the research I've done with new Canadian and refugee children in the high schools when they came into New Brunswick, they're yearning for a sense of belonging. They're yearning for a sense of home, away from the home that they had to flee from. And for us to understand the journey that they've gone through to arrive in New Brunswick, and then the struggles that they're having with their families to try and to adjust to this new reality and this new life, having not had the opportunity to grieve, having to relinquish what they've left behind, including significant loss of family members, as Hermaeus has illustrated so vividly in The Arms of Inup. And just the complexity of the lived experience. And for very young children and their families, the magnitude of the responsibility that their parents have in trying to adjust to a new country and be able to find employment and to be able to successfully assist their children in creating a new life for themselves in Canada, it has tremendous implications for how we as mental health care professionals and community members who welcome them into our communities should go about doing that. And I think it was really poignant how the children in the research study described a sense of wanting to belong. And how are we going to accomplish that? And I think In the Arms of Inup has made the path visible, has helped us have vivid insights into how we can begin to have these conversations amongst us and come together. And I think that togetherness is what Hermes and you, Eve, have really invited us to do in reading this book. And certainly I walked away from it very reflective, and it was challenging my working assumptions. And this is after over 25 years in the trade. So certainly it's well worth the read.
Thank you.
And Dr. Masfeller, what would you see as the most important consideration in a situation like this? How does a therapist balance the need to protect the storyteller when the story is so traumatic with the actual telling of the story?
I think one of the things that really came through from our discussion tonight, as well as reading the book, is the pace of being able to listen to the story, because it's in the telling of the story that the healing is happening. So to force the story to come more quickly, for the narrator of that story to divulge it more quickly than is feasible, it's a sense of you're trying to accelerate a healing process that requires time. And that was certainly something that really came across in Eve's writings and in Hermes's story, was that this is not something that can be rushed. It takes iterations of the story and being able to revisit those lived experiences and to author and re-author the story in order to work through the grief and the deep sense of loss and to find the meaning. So it's all these paradoxes and juxtapositions within the richness of that narration that really requires us as mental health care professionals to deeply, deeply listen to what is being said and what is not being said, to understand, to even scratch the surface of what has just happened to this person, and how are we together, like as Yolande would say, as a fellow traveler, coming alongside and being together with them to help them on a healing journey, hoping that there's some way that we can create something that will, through the therapeutic relationship, that will help that healing begin. But certainly the complexity of that picture became very vivid in reading the book. And, you know, when you think of some of the manualized or 8 to 12 week programs that have been developed in an attempt to address some of the PTSD that our veterans coming back from overseas have to manage, certainly makes you stop and pause, like, what are we doing and how can we do it better? And I think this story will help us begin that conversation.
And I think it lends itself to like narrative type work. You're literally telling the narrative therapy, reauthorizing, externalizing, and there's a lot in there as well. It's certainly, as you said, in solution focused and the looking for the solution. It doesn't seem like that sort of simplistic approach will quite cut the mustard. You have to drill down quite a bit deeper. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not a quick fix situation, and it not only mental health care professionals, but also like people who support the mental health therapists who are working to help individuals like Hermes and his family is like the whole system, in terms of insurance companies, the healthcare system, community agencies. Like it feels like we have to come together as a collective and look at this complex picture, like in a different way that makes more sense.
Yeah, give people more time and space, really, right? We don't want to. We want to be able to, I guess, respond to things as they come up, because they don't know. Usually, when stuff comes up, it's in that doorknob confession, the last 10 minutes of a session, but the idea that, you don't want to turn into Bob Newhart's class. Oh, we don't deal with that. We don't deal with that. You can't manualize it. You have to deal with it when it comes up and drill down. So I'm seeing that just from my first, few experiences in the field. It's you can always go deeper, right? Yeah, absolutely. And Jeremias, in some ways, Eve also became part of the story, and she shared her story with you as part of her life writing class that you took part in at MCAF. And how was this important in the process, and did it help build trust?
That's for you or for me?
That's what it was. Yeah.
No, it's for him.
Oh, sorry, for you. Yeah.
It's I think if we talk about trust, that's it took away from me when I was a kid, and obviously coming to a new context and trying to look for help, and when there's somebody open the doors, and then immediately they start to talk about flashbacks and you cannot sleep. Okay, so here is the pill prescription, and uh, if it's that the case, I just can go to shopper and get my pills for headache or to sleep, right?
Mhm.
But I think in terms of trust, it's really you have to feel safe first, and the second thing is the person. You have to keep in mind that even though you cannot speak English yet, you are very smart, intelligent to read the other person who is in front of you.
Mhm.
That's happened to me so many times. I went to a Victoria Mental Health Center here in Fredericton, and the professional said, okay, so we have 45 minutes. And from the first second, when he tells me 45 minutes or 1 hour, you know what? I'm just gonna answer to your question. I'm not here for me. I'm here for you.
Mhm.
You have one period time for me. That time doesn't work for me.
Right.
So it's okay. Here is the pill prescription and the end. And why you and the other thing like bothers me a lot is that in the end he gave me like 2-3 tips of how to deal with my mental health. These three sheet, like these 3 papers, I got it in my university in Guatemala when I was doing psychology, my first year in university. This is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a human being who can at least give me 5 minutes of her time to listen to what I have to say.
Mhm.
And that is what 100% agree with Eve, and you frame it really well. Culturally speaking, we're different. We are respect so much our oldest. We have so much respect to somebody, and even me, I have to listen to you what you're saying, and then that's how the conversation starts.
Yeah.
And probably this is something like, because I'm not 100% sure yet, that's how our communities in Guatemala, we still survive without no any professional mental health. Why? We pray together, we cry together, we eat together, and if it is just one tortilla and we are 20 people, we share that tortilla.
Yeah.
In this culture here, I have one bread, that bread is for me.
Mhm.
And there is 10 people, bad for you, but I have my bread because this is mine. And this is something like, that's why I'm saying in terms of mental health, it's the trust that is coming is vice versa. If I see something like you pushing me, saying, okay, we have to do it because time is flying. So many times I told Eve, there is no rush, there is no speed. This is my life.
Yeah.
This is my life. And if my life, if I'm a 47 years old now, it has been 47 years of running and trying to save my life. And you're pushing me right now? No, thanks.
Mhm.
And this
Yeah.
meeting is over. And I ran away. I just walk away because no, that's cannot work like that, right? So that's where I really appreciate and thank you, Eve, for being patient with me, because otherwise, like, I don't really care if it's gonna buy a book or not. But there is something very important to like the balance in between, sharing the true story from her too. She said, okay, this is what happened to me. And we end up both crying together. And that, to me, this is a more pure, sacred moment, because what the professional says here, no, if you're going too much and I feel like I get into your story, no, I have to stop there and I'll see you next day.
Yeah, we're out of time for today. Yeah.
You are just, what you do is taking away the head of your client. And that is dangerous because you don't know, you're not guaranteeing what is going to happen next. And who cares about that? How many people with the mental health center, they go there and they coming back at night, they commit suicide. Right. In Fredericton, because I work with newcomers, I have like so far maybe around 11, 12 people who were trying to do mental health process and they just take away their life, you know. There is a Guatemalan gentleman. I don't know if you remember Susan, if you were here, or Helene, Marcos. Marcos is a Guatemalan man. He was here more than, he came here in the 80s when the Civil War. Mm-hmm. When the Civil War was really tough in Guatemala, he was a refugee, he was accepted here. Mm. When I came to Canada, the Victoria Mental Health Center called me 2-3 years later to help him to go and interpret it for him because he couldn't speak anymore. He said, well, they don't know, he doesn't know English. And that's why we call you. Okay, I came in and nice to meet you. My name is Jeremias and what's going on? Mm-hmm. And he said, how long you been in Canada? 3 years or 4. Are you kidding me? I stopped to talk because I'm in here like almost how many years, like, but I'm tired. I just take care of it. I just don't want to talk anymore. I'm tired. Mm-hmm. 7 years later, he took away his life. Mm-hmm. He disappeared. He appeared in the Daily Gleaner, and a man disappeared. And please, if you see something, and after 3 or 4 days, his body appeared on the San John River. Mm-hmm. So a story like that, like, is this the key, as you ask, like trust. The trust is, we're smart, even though we're not from here, but we can read your body language. Yeah. If you're welcoming me, if you're sort of like doing your job, like, and this is the part, like in a really organic way, my language to say, you have to humanize the people who's in front of you, for God's sake. And that's what I'm saying. My frustration for mental health provider from here to all across Canada, when I was a part of the board of directors of the Canadian Council for Refugee, always I called for a caucus meeting for mental health because I was curious to see what other centers are doing. Nothing. And I know that the Center, the Foundation for Torture in Toronto, I know Asset from Iran, who was incarcerated, tortured. He published his book too. The same experience. Yeah. So mental health has to improve. Yeah. Okay, how is going to be improved? I think, and this is where I'm coming back again, I think we have so much here in our communities. We have to stop being afraid. We have to talk to our oldest. We had to bring the Ethnic Cultures Association on board. Yep. How you were dealing with that today? And that is a dream that I have, and Helen knows about it, and Eve knows about it. And I hope one day that we're gonna do it. Mm-hmm. Is I have a center where I feel safe to go. Yeah. Where a center where I can bring my client when it doesn't need a Tylenol, doesn't need a pill to sleep. The only thing it needs is somebody who can, in a quality way, can read and can listen to what's happening. Mm-hmm. I don't speak Arabic, but I welcome my clients. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I do, but
yeah, it's knowing that if you reach out, someone will reach back, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that to me is very important because you don't know what you're dealing with. You can have your PhD, you can have like, you can be really brilliant, 2, 3, 4, 5 diploma, but you're dealing with one case. what you don't have any idea what you're
Right.
dealing for. And that's why, I don't know, I think it's really because of the complexity, as you mentioned, both Suzanne and Helen, we're dealing with human being, and who did not choose to be these stories. It's their own story, which we have to, I'm not saying for me, we have to honor them, their story, if we want our society to really engage and provide that mental health, that we have to build trust in between ourselves, in between the healers and the client. Yeah.
And as part of my work with newcomers, I've put together some content for like in employment settings and that kind of thing, just to compare workplace culture in Canada versus some countries, and the idea of collective versus individual. And one thing, we were comparing collective, individual, the individual, the group, and they said, your society can either be really oriented on time-based or on relationships. And that's what it is. It's taking the time to actually make the relationship. So in a meeting, we'll have small talk for 10 minutes and then get down to business. But in other cultures, the emphasis is on that relationship. And I know coming from Ontario to New Brunswick felt like a different pace of living. Everyone was way more laid back and everyone told me to slow down. But coming from, a culture where, like you say, it's community-based, they share everything, and you do things on your own time. And but the value in that is that you're building relationships. And you can't do that in 10 minutes of small talk, right? So I think, collective and individual, the question is whether you're worried about time or whether you're worried about building a relationship.
But also remember, what is the story you're talking about? We're talking about life.
Yeah.
We're talking about somebody who's dreaming, somebody like who is in a second to take away their life or to keep going with that. And that is important for me, telling the story. And the professional or the healers who is with me, I just want a second of their time. And this is, I feel so bad, and I pray for Eve so many times, because I was telling her all the stuff, and I'm coming back. What did I did? Like, I put so much on her, and that's just myself. I feel like guilty sometimes. Like, I should tell her that, like, this is horrific. And once again, because as a Canadian, you study post-traumatic stress, but you don't know my experience.
Yeah.
The picture that I'm telling you is something like is a video that is still here. And when I'm sharing with you, I share so many times with Eve. I feel sometimes I'm deaf, and I don't know if it's really me who's talking. So this is how I feel. Like, and anytime I share my story, I'm still shaking, because it's really painful, right? So that's why it's very important. Like the word trust is, all of us, we know the definition of that. So.
And as well with your work with newcomers, I found it really striking in the book, the one scene that Eve wanted to share about Arameus's work with newcomers in the school. There's a great evocative scene where you advocated for a student, and we set that aside to read. Eve, if you want to share that part, that was really neat.
Yeah. Yes. This is after this student who seemed to be doing well in school, and then all of a sudden he gets in trouble. It seemed like he was settling in well. Then something happened. He was caught using his cell phone during class time, and the vice principal took him to his office. It turned into a traumatic experience. The boy said he was only putting the phone away. This young fellow came from a war-torn country. He had seen so much genocide and torture. I was concerned the administration never took this into consideration when they decided to discipline him. When he was told to leave the office and leave his cell phone, he refused and sat down. The VP tried to push him out the door and threatened to call the police. Can you imagine what this young man was thinking and feeling? The policewoman came and tried to take the student's hand. He pushed her back and refused to leave. He told her the VP was lying. They called for backup. They put him on the floor, stepped on him, and put him in a chokehold and took him to the lockup. They never contacted the parents or me. When he was released, he was so sad, angry, and confused. He called me in tears. The second day, I set up an appointment with the VP. I did not even think to consult with my boss. I was so angry. But everything changed when the door opened and I was called by my name. The VP knew me. I said, "Do you even know this student?" He said, "No." So I explained this boy's situation. I explained that this phone was all he had. He was the only son of a mother who did not make it out of the refugee camp. He still used the phone to check on his mom. I learned a lot that day too. I found out how hard he was working. His story connected with me. He was not selfish. He was kind and respectful. He was sending money to his mother. The punishment was to kick him out of school for 6 months. I asked the VP to go to the police station to get rid of that charge. The student did not touch the VP or the police. I ripped up the paper telling the boy he was expelled from school. Arameus says the vice principal was surprised by the emotion he was showing, but he was listening. "I want you to call that student to come back tomorrow or I call human rights," he told the school administrator. Arameus's words moved the vice principal. He was willing to give the student a chance, and that chance is one of Arameus's success stories. The young man ended up graduating, is now married, and lives in Edmonton. This story ended well, but it could have had a completely different ending. Stories like this one, with happy endings, still buoy Arameus up when he feels himself sinking in a world where racism and intolerance never completely disappear. To see youth succeed against the odds gives him the energy he needs to keep working. Arameus is a constant cheerleader. If a student is told they will be lucky if they even graduate, he tells them they can be successful professionals in the future, as long as they work hard and believe in themselves.
Right. And what's striking in that is an absence of trauma-informed services, right? People that understand trauma, that people are, and I guess it works from an expectation that people are going to be bringing trauma with them to school and to the services. And I think I've noticed it just in my a little bit of work, but I think all of us can relate to when we deal with people who are marginalized and we're doing this work to build them up. So often something will happen that'll just undo the work. And then we're frustrated by that because it sets the person back. Just because someone didn't take the time to think or didn't take the time to relate to that person, it undid some of the work that we did. And I've seen that happen with my clients as well.
I
yeah.
think it also speaks to the importance of a hope-focused approach, where you look for what's right for the person, what strengths they bring to their situation and to their life, because I think that's what in reading and listening to that story, Hermaeus did for me was, look for what's right with the child, look for what's good in them, and the kindness and the generosity, and not just assume that, this person, like, criminalizing them in some way for the behavior without taking the time to really understand their story and what's happening for them and seeing the big picture.
Yeah.
So again, it's another example of where the book makes you stop and think about, okay, what's going on in our school systems and how are these children from other countries, where they're coming in and it's already difficult circumstances, and where they're hoping to find some sense of safety in the school. And a lot of them put, from the research, we've noticed that a lot of the children really value being able to go to school. They showed photographs of how their school in their homeland had been blown to bits, but they would still make attempts to learn to read and write and continue with that. So they really, really want to be in school and to learn, and they're very open to learning. So it's, again, let's stop and think, folks, about what we're doing here before we react, because it really is a reaction as opposed to being proactive and working together to find a way forward that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to trauma and the work involving trauma narratives, and that's part of the processing process. But Dr. Maspiller, how can a telling of a trauma narrative like Aramis' story help himself, but also help others?
I think a quality that I really value is, the older I get in the profession, the more I value it, is humility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's where we come from, that place of being willing to be open-minded and being willing to learn. Even though we feel that we know a lot, there's still more to learn and to understand. And that some of the taken for grantedness we have around our expertiseness, or what we think we know about how to help people in the mental health field or as teachers and educators, it's having the humility and the openness and flexibility to be able to say, hey, maybe there's something I could learn from this person. And I see that in how even Hermes have developed their relationship. They've learned from each other. There's a reciprocity to it.
Yeah.
So as we work together, we figure things out together and we learn from each other. Sharing food, in terms of, that's a way in which in many cultures people get together. It's around the kitchen table or the dining table to share food and to share stories and to attempt to understand each other. So it's as if sharing the food and being at the table is a place to create that shared understanding. It's like a really powerful metaphor. So in the same way, Inup was both a source of courage and fear, or safety and fear. It's just being able to grapple with that complexity and trying to find a way forward through it. So it's certainly not easy questions to answer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And giving people the time and the space, right? And I know Eve initially said this would take about 20 minutes. So we're giving ourselves the time and space to have this discussion. That's important. It would be incredibly disingenuous for us to talk about that and go, oh, we're out of time for today. However, it is wonderful to have this discussion. And I've learned a lot from reading the book and from learning more. I didn't know anything about Guatemala before the book. And I was actually just watching the documentary on Crave about Bishop Herardi this week as well. So I'm learning what I can. But I guess to close out, though, I wanted to sort of go around and ask either, what needs to change to bring effective mental health services to refugees and newcomers, but also how can counselors and psychotherapists better serve those with complex and chronic trauma? And how does the book speak to that? So I guess we could all go around, whoever wants to start there, and just kind of give a closing little statement about the topic, I suppose.
Well, for myself, I really support Jeremia's dream, pardon me. And I think that kind of a center or space is really important. And I think it's about, just from what I've experienced as well, just connecting Canadians, connecting newcomers, and it's that accompaniment, that befriending, that community-based approach. And I think it's really, when you shared that, Jeremias, I thought of the experience when the Syrians came to Canada, and immediately all these Canadians just volunteered, right? I mean, ordinary people, church groups, whatever, no experience, but out of a good heart, and took on that process. And so I think, especially in the Maritimes, I think it's very possible, because there is still the remnants of a communal culture here that people understand, and how to be people first with each other. So I think a space or a place, or, that just focuses on that, and goes where people need to go, is I support that. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think, from what I know and what I've experienced, that's what works.
Yeah.
But it's very different than any conception of how we structure services or anything else like that. So, and I think that's also the beauty of it, And I think people would be attracted by that as well. So
Yeah.
I just support you in that dream, and any way that I can be supportive. I think it's wonderful. I think we have to do a lot of unlearning and
Yeah.
relearning and
Unsettling, right? Becoming
yeah,
less of a settler
exactly.
mindset. Yeah.
But people need examples of how it can work. And so that's what, a center or a place or a space. I don't know if it's a building, but people connecting, spaces for that to happen is critical. And I think there's an openness here to do that. And I think we need to do it, or, all this talk about new immigration policy and, the Maritimes needs all these immigrants, but they're not prepared
Right.
to put in the supports that people need.
Absolutely.
Is just going to fall flat. So I also think it's a way to counteract racism as
Yeah.
well, because it's only when people start to meet people, really meet people, that, all those fears and fallacies fall away.
Absolutely.
So,
and oftentimes people's trauma is the missing piece. I've taught students that I couldn't understand, like I have a background in learning disabilities, and there was something missing there. And then when I found there was a trauma, there was a processing difficulty. Oh, that's why it didn't line up. There's always bringing it to everything, whether that's teaching or mental health or service provision, just knowing it's in there and that there's the capacity for it, for sure. Yeah.
Another thing that I think that we have to think a lot about is there's so many ways to tell your story. Armaeus and I have talked about this so much.
Yes.
So maybe you don't speak, English, but you and I can go for a walk. You and I can listen to music together. You and I can dance together. You and I can make a craft together. You and I can paint together.
Mhm.
And I'm going to learn about you, whether I speak your language or not. If I'm really listening, if I'm really watching, like Armaeus does it all the time with soccer. That's how he,
Yeah.
And I think we need to get outside more. I did do a little bit of work in First Nations communities. There was a First Nations community that got me to come up once, and they had like open house. People, it was an open house. If they needed to talk to me, it was open house.
Mm-hmm.
And it was first come, first serve. And some people stayed 2 hours. Some people stayed 10 minutes. So it really made me excited that I know there are ways we could do this. And I don't want to get in a different discussion, but, even teaming up with a lot of Aboriginal people and ideas about how to deliver services wouldn't hurt at all, because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of wisdom there. And the idea of having a safe place like a healing center where all kinds of things could be used, but music, art, sports, everything. There needs to be no, like we need to be completely open. And you can learn these things. You can learn how to, I know that I'm challenging myself, and I'm not young, and I'm challenging myself to interpret things in a totally different way. So I know if I can do it, surely all these up and coming counselors and therapists should be ready for it too. This has been great, by the way. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, that coffee sharing, as Helen shared, Eve just precisely said, my counseling, my counseling, I can say it. I was shy to say it before. For all my entire life, when I came to Canada, I do it in the soccer field, not in my office. My office from 1 to 10, maybe 2 or 3 of them. But in the soccer field, hey, Mr. Teko, this is what happened to me in Syria, my mom, my dad, and we are in the middle of this, like the game. And I have to stop playing because this second, I have the privilege to listen and give an opportunity to this little guy, to this little girl. So that's where the dream is coming. That's why even though I'm crying a lot about my story, because it's in me anytime I speak about it. But I wish one day that somebody else like me can go to a safe place and not to go to all the cracks that I went through.
Mm.
And I still need, like this moment, I still need you in my life. But there is a key component of that: my cultures versus Canadian cultures. My space, okay? Like, yes, it's important, your space, but also if we are working with human being, it's important to know that as a Mayan, you are my mom, you are my sister, you are my dad, you are my brother. So how I'm gonna destroy you if you are me?
Mhm.
So, but once again, is the secret of who we are. And when we understand that part of our cultures, we will have the Middle Easterns, we will have the Syrians, we will have the Arabic, the Africans, all around the world feeling connected. And when they feel connected, then our children, our generation, they will be living once again. I don't want to see, and I don't want to read more this 4,000 people committing suicide or thinking about mental health across Canada. I don't want to see that anymore. For the past 15, 18 years, I mean, across Canada, attending conferences about mental health, our children, our youth, people, they're killing themselves, the mental health. I am tired of it. So with this book, with my story, I'm a dreamer. I want to see something that is going to happen. And I will leave Canada, but before leaving Canada, I wanna be part of this change, because we deserve an opportunity, and for every single one. I'm not talking about Mayans. I'm not talking about Afro. I'm talking to every single one. I'm talking to my fellow Canadians, born to mom, dad, sister. It's time to stop, to think and rethink, and force your daughters, your son, to the mental health, and the police and the security. They have to treat them as a criminal in order to get treatment.
Yeah.
This is insane. I'm telling you that because I have some situation here too. So that's what I'm saying. It's really important to take into accountability to each individual. And when we are talking about mental health, mental health is not black and white. It's you and it's me. When a student from Leo High School took his life away, and I was just with him 2 days ago, he was doing volunteering for me, and he took his life away. I cried 2, 3, 4 times, many times, because many people, they say, oh, poor him, he was Leo High School student, he was so brilliant. But this is a call for all of us. This is a responsibility of the priest, of the pastor, of the teacher, of the guidance, everybody. Not blaming the system. The system is there. But if the system doesn't work, we have to do something around that. I'm sorry, I'm getting so into emotion when I'm talking
that's
about.
Great. Thank you.
But thank you very much for this time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you, Suzanne, Helen, to come up. And Helen knows about my dream, that we talk in the park, and really, and thanks for your support, Suzanne. And I have that idea, but my work, I'm working Sunday to Sunday.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it's gonna be. I don't know how we're gonna start it, but I want to see it one day. And I thank you. I really, really appreciate this moment. And this is, I feel honored for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Did anyone have anything else to add, or?
No, I think it's
All right.
been great. It's been great.
So much. And thank you for your work in the book, and Aramis for sharing your story. And it's certainly going to impact how I go forward in my career in mental health. So that's really valuable. Thank you very much,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.